Looks like most people have logged on, so we'll go ahead and get started. I would love to introduce you to our fearless leader, Yvette Simpson, our Chief Political Officer, Chris Scott, and our Senior Electoral Manager, Christine Senteno. So if y'all would like to start the presentation, I will mute myself.
Absolutely. Can you all see me and hear me? I'm Yvette Simpson, CEO of Democracy for America. And the team just reminded me that 4 years ago, last month, I was on the ground with the incomparable Stacey Abrams, just starting out at DFA. I was the federal elections manager for the organization at the time, but was covering some of our state candidates for one of our other electoral managers who was out, and thus began my DFA journey. I can't believe it's been this long. It has been a wonderful journey, and I just want to thank every single one on this call for your support of our work. We are 18 years old this year, y'all, and I'm super excited about the prospect of us hitting 20 years in just a couple of years. Jim always laughs and says, Yvette, don't jinx us. But I think after 18 years, I think we're going to be good. So really exciting to think about our legacy coming out of a presidential campaign and still being here, a very relevant part of the movement even now. I want to make sure everybody can hear me. Can everyone hear me okay? Just want to make sure. Okay. So I'm going to start by talking about our theory of change. What is our North Star? You know, how are we distinct? What's the DFA difference? And our real strategy is that we consolidate power, we maximize impact, and we position advanced strike teams in critical battleground states. And what that means is that we're very efficient in so many ways because we work alongside campaigns, we work alongside other organizations to consolidate power with the voter, of course, in the center of that. We maximize our impact because we work in a 50-state strategy across the country. We do a layer cake strategy where we're working together from the bottom of the ticket to build power at the top of the ticket. And Chris and Christine will talk a little more specifically about how we're doing that work this year. And we also position advanced strike teams, which means we're the first out, typically. We endorse early, we support strong all the way through, and of course, continue to support our elected officials once they win to push forward important progressive policy. So that makes us distinct and special. It is the DFA difference. I think it's the reason we've been relevant and even more powerful as the years have gone on. And of course, that consolidation of power includes all of you, all of our members who make phone calls and do text messages and organize on the ground with our candidates. Our investment focus and solutions, how do we invest resources? How do we invest our time, particularly in this year? And those of you who have had access to our prospectus, you've seen this, but our focus has been the new American majority. That's been something that we've been prioritizing a lot since our founding. I don't know if you guys know that was a part of Howard's big focus, was really looking at progressive, new American majority, young people, progressives, Black and brown people, and we're hyper focused on that. As you know, baby boomers are no longer a majority. Those millennials are out there, and we need to make sure we're grabbing them and talking to them and engaging them. And then registered BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color voters are the key to flipping battleground states, because if we can engage them, they're large enough in number that we can actually flip very, very key states. Unfortunately, our party and some of our other organizations don't prioritize these voters enough and in the right way. So progressive organizations like DFA, where we prioritize these voters, have been able to do that. We do have a solution, and I think it's to fill the gaps in those key voter engagement areas and work the correct structural barriers to democracy. So as you can imagine, we've not typically built the infrastructure to engage infrequent voters, people who have not traditionally been engaged in the system. DFA has been investing in that infrastructure over the last few years really aggressively, and we actually are planning to build that up more and more as we go forward. And as you know, there are structural barriers to democracy for some of these key demographics. We know that there is a huge push to suppress the votes of these key demographics and individual voters. And so we have to make sure that we are doing that, and we have a plan to invest in that significantly in the coming years. Next slide. We also are focusing on women of color out front and increasing the leadership of women of color. We believe that investing in female candidates of color just makes sense. As federal elections manager in 2018, I had the privilege of working with 40 congressional candidates and to help ensure the most progressive, the most diverse, and the most female class of Congress we have ever had in American history. And I'm extremely proud of our legacy in that. That work needs to continue. Women of color are dramatically underrepresented in government, and we need to make a correction to make sure that our democracy reflects our country and our values as progressives. So it's about integrity, right? Like since 2019, nearly 60% of our endorsements, fundraising support, and embedded campaign support have gone to female candidates of color. And our very first endorsements of this cycle, the first 10 endorsements we made were of women of color. And we're really proud of that legacy. It's an important momentum, for a part of our momentum going forward. Really, really proud of that. And you'll hear more about those strategies in just a few minutes. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris Scott, who is our Chief Political Officer. Chris has been with us for just over a year, and then he will also share the stage with Christine Senteno, who just joined our team not long ago. Chris?
Thanks, Yvette. So when we're talking about our strategy, one of the biggest strengths for DFA is that we're always or oftentimes first on the scene. We believe that the earlier that you invest in campaigns, the earlier that we're able to make an endorsement, the more successful we can be down the line. We double down, especially in these midterms, on maintaining a data-driven organizing program. For progressive candidates, that has always been the greatest pathway to victory for us. When we organize our people, we generate movements, not just waves that last a long time. And that's how we're able to not just flip legislative seats, but flip states overall in the long haul and keep them blue. We have probably the most comprehensive endorsement process in the movement. Our candidates have to go through 5 steps. We want to really vet our candidates. It's great to fall in love, and we know the people can fall in love, but we also want to make sure that our candidates really understand what they need to do to actually go out there and win. And then one of the great things about us is that we're always forward thinking. We're trying to predict what our opposition is doing before they do it. Every now and then they catch us, but it does not take us long to make that adjustment to move our candidates and get them ready for what's next. And then last but not least, we are most effective when we can deploy and offer ground support in the early stages and not wait till, a month before your election. So many voters, by the time you get to that last month, have already kind of made up their mind. So we believe for us that we can change the electoral map when we're making these investments on the ground through field early on. Next slide. So speaking of adjustments and trying to predict the opposition, I think one of the things that nobody saw coming in this midterm was the amount of money that was going to start getting spent on the hard side, which is on the independent expenditure side, to win some of these seats. But what we did predict is we knew that the Republican Party was going to be extremely aggressive this year in trying to flip Congress. So to this day, 831 candidates, that's more than has ever happened for Republican candidates that have filed to run. They are outraising us almost 2 to 1 of what we did to flip the House in 2018. And so for us, our pivot and our counteraction is targeting through our endorsements and our ground support, some of these areas that we know the GOP is going heavy at, targeting states like North Carolina, going after Wisconsin earlier, going in Texas a lot earlier so that we can try to circumvent what we know that they want to build towards. Next slide. But as I mentioned, probably the biggest threat is the dark money spending right now. We are seeing a ridiculous and almost grotesque amount of money spent in primaries just to defeat progressive challengers. And that means a couple of things. One, folks have recognized that progressive candidates have a message that are resonating with the people more, so they are doubling down on trying to buy elections. Can we drown out progressive voices if we flood the airways, if we flood TV more, that even when we're doing what we need to do on the ground, we can cancel some of that out? And so we took some tough losses this year, and we had some good wins. I think everybody saw Summer Lee pulled out an incredible race where over $3.1 million was spent against her in dark money from APAC, from DMFI, and from crypto billionaires. But we took some hard losses in North Carolina where we saw Nida Lam lose, Erica Smith lose. Just look at those numbers: $3.5 million, $2.4 million. Altogether, what we saw in just about the month of May, over $10.2 million have been spent against our candidates to try to beat them. And when they're spending this money, it's not about boosting up the candidate that they're trying to support. They are deliberately spreading misinformation about progressive candidates and hoping that voters don't have time to actually check the facts, because it's oftentimes coming in the last month of the election to a month and a half out. Next slide. So for us this year, everything comes back to our 50-state strategy. It is the cornerstone of our work. Our layer cake strategy, if we fight everywhere, we can win everywhere. But having that layer cake strategy, having programs that overlap, having candidates that overlap across the ticket makes us so successful. It's why we've elected over 1,100 candidates in our 18 years of existence. And so for us, some of our key programs, our Purple to Blue program, which focuses on state legislative and executive office in states. Our Flip the South, we believe that Democrats can win in the South if they actually take the time to invest in the South. And so that's something that we double down on. In our Established Justice program, that focuses on making sure that we have progressive voices that are transforming our criminal justice system from the inside. So when we came into 2022, there were really 4 pillars that was going to guide our work for this year. We knew we had to save the Senate because we had people like Joe Manchin, like Christine Senteno, that were not going to do the right thing when they needed to do the right thing. We wanted to protect the House and make sure that Democrats keep the majority in the House. So that means protecting our progressive incumbents, but not just playing defense. We needed to look for opportunities where we can add and expand to that progressive majority, and then make history by electing the first Black woman governor. We have 2 phenomenal candidates. Christine will get into them a little bit later, but in Georgia and Iowa, we have some great candidates that can make history. And we need to return a Black woman to the United States Senate. Having a US Senate that doesn't have a Black woman is not having a Senate that's reflective of our democracy. And then overall, finally, having success through our 50-state strategy initiatives. That's that programmatic work that I talked about that makes us so successful in the first place. Next slide. So our Purple to Blue program, and this is probably, I will argue, the most important program that we have of the cycle. What we have seen is that Congress has been grotesquely ineffective this year. And so a lot of these battles that we are having to protect rights are happening on the front lines in states. And so that means a couple of things. We have state legislatures that we can flip this year. Arizona is one where you're looking at 3 seats away. Michigan is 5 seats away in both of their chambers. Wisconsin is 6 seats away in its Senate chamber. But it's also looking at those executive offices. We know, look, there's going to be some chambers that we can't flip. We just don't have the pathway to do it this cycle, but we are going to put it on a pathway. So in places like Florida, like Georgia, like Texas, where you're not going to flip the legislature, let's get in some governors and let's get some attorney generals and let's get some secretary of states that can thwart what we already know the Republican Party will do to strip rights away. I think for a lot of us, we looked at Ohio this week and saw a disappointing bill pass where we're actually arming teachers now. Those are the type of fights that our Purple to Blue program puts us on a path to take care of that before that can happen in the first place. So I'm gonna turn it over to Christine a little bit to talk about some of the great candidates that we have in some of our Purple to Blue states this year. Christine.
Thanks, Chris. Before I get to Purple to Blue, I just want to give a general overview. So far, Democracy for America has endorsed 79 endorsements in total, and we're still adding to that each week. So if you know of any progressive candidates as you're out there, we encourage you to encourage them to go to the website and then apply for endorsement with us. As Chris mentioned, it's a 5-step program, and it's totally worth the effort, but I just wanted to give that plug. With our Purple to Blue candidates, and with all our candidates for that matter, we know that field works. Knocking on doors, talking to voters, tracking our supporters, that's what works. So once we get through the endorsement process, we work hand in hand with our organizing team and with our endorsed candidate teams with their campaigns to support a strong field program. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the down ballot candidates who make up a strong bench for DFA. In North Carolina, that's a perfect example. North Carolina just went through their primaries, and we were out on the ground supporting those candidates. We had some really great candidates out there, including Natalie Murdoch, who's been the incumbent. She's the incumbent. She was running for Senate District 20. Her district encompasses most of Durham County. Murdoch was appointed by Governor Cooper in April of 2019. And she's the first woman of color under 40 to be elected to the North Carolina General Assembly. She was elected in 2020, earning over 100,000 votes. We also supported LaWanna Mayfield and Vi Lyles, who are both from Charlotte. Vi Lyles is the incumbent mayor of Charlotte, and LaWanna is an at-large. She's running for at-large city council. She's been on city council before, but she was running again, and she won her primary. In Vi Lyles' first term as mayor, she focused on safe quality housing, transportation, a good living wage, all of the things that DFA is about. Charlotte committed about $50 million for affordable housing under her leadership, which was matched by private sector, and turned it into housing for 50,000 families in Charlotte. Charlotte's seen over 27,000 new jobs and development of their light rail system under her leadership. And like I said, both of them won their primary, but their challenge is going to be their municipal race. Their general election is on July 26th. So for them, the challenge is going to be getting Democrats out to vote in a municipal election while the rest of North Carolina stays home and waits for the general. All of this work that we've done in North Carolina during the generals clearly will help Sherry Beasley as she runs for Senate in North Carolina, and hopefully will be the first Black woman elected to Senate in North Carolina. There are some races where we lost. So we were present in Pennsylvania during the primaries as well. And we had a good candidate, Andre Carroll, who was running for a House seat in Philadelphia. And he had a great program, but his data was a little off. So they reached all their goals. They reached their win number, but their win number turned out to be off, and he ended up losing his race. So while he hit his goals, we still want to be in touch with him and be sure that as he runs again, as he's considering that, we can help him with training, and hopefully he'll have a chance of winning next time around. So even in races that we don't win, there still could be a silver lining. These are some of our down ballot races that help support, you know, the larger races, the wider races. And, you know, these are really important. I wish I can go through all of the down ballot races. Clearly I can't do that. I'll give you some more in just a couple of minutes, but I do want to point out Terry Brown, who also was running in North Carolina and won his House district seat. Laverna Fortune, who's running for mayor of Providence, Rhode Island. She's a Haitian immigrant, an Afro-Latina, a single mom. She's currently on the city council and she's running for mayor. So we can go on and on and on about some great candidates that we have and how they're going to help to inspire people in these purple to blue states and hopefully help build in terms of, you know, the larger races that we're running there. Chris, I'll turn it back to you so we could talk a little bit more about Flip the South.
Mm-hmm. Last thing I want to say about Purple to Blue, and it's perfect segue because it goes into our Flip the South strategy. When we look at Texas and when we look at Georgia, those are two of those states where we talk about we cannot flip the legislature right now, but we got some phenomenal candidates running for governor in those states. And the way that we make sure that we can have success when we're running a statewide race, when we're running for US Senate or we're running for governor, is making sure that we're building up that bench for down ballot candidates. So looking at Flip the South, you heard me say earlier, we want to heavily invest in the South. When you're looking at us overall, you can probably expect about 40% of our endorsements this year will come from Southern states. We believe that there is definitely a pathway to victory in the South, and that's actually where our country is shifting, especially when you heard Yvette say earlier, we're focusing on a new American majority. That is a key cog in what is going to make not only progressive, but Democrats successful over the next several decades. So I'll turn it back to Christine in a second. But again, flipping the South is all about making an investment early on, not waiting until the end of the election. And then one of the other things we do the best is that not only do we make the investment, but we get our partners to come along and start making these investments earlier. And so we've been able to have a lot of conversations with the progressive movement and change that perspective of how people are looking at the South as a winnable pathway to victory now and not just several cycles from now. Christine?
Great. So as Chris said, we're building relationships with these campaigns. We're working with them to ensure that the field campaign is they have a good ground game and they're running well. I can talk forever about Stacey Abrams and Beto O'Rourke, who we've endorsed. We've been on the ground in Texas with all of the folks from Texas. We've also been on the ground in Pennsylvania and North Carolina. So like I said, I can talk a lot about Stacey Abrams and Beto O'Rourke, but I'm assuming that you already know a lot about them. So I'm going to highlight some of the folks that maybe haven't heard so much about. We are endorsing Chris Jones, who's running for governor in Arkansas. The guy is literally a rocket scientist. He attended Morehouse College on a NASA scholarship for physics and math. Then he went on to study at MIT and become a nuclear engineer. He also earned a PhD in urban planning. The only reason he's not an astronaut right now is because he's got a little bit of hearing loss in one of his ears. So that disqualified him. Once he came back to Arkansas, he thought it was really important to go back home. He had become an ordained minister. And then he went back home and led the Arkansas Regional Innovation Hub. It's a nonprofit that provides tools for entrepreneurs and students to prepare them to join and grow Arkansas's economic ecosystem. He handily won his primary, and in the general, he's going to have a tough race against, of all people, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. We already talked a little bit. We mentioned Sherry Beasley, who's running for Senate in North Carolina, excuse me. In 2019, she made history becoming the first African-American woman to serve as Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. Hopefully she'll make history again by becoming the first African-American woman senator for North Carolina. She has strong support from unions and other progressive partners. We've been on the ground to help her during the primary. Before that, there was a lot of lead up to that where we were helping out, and we're continuing to stay in partnership with her as we're, preparing for the generals. Greg Cassar is running for Congress in Texas. He's the son of Mexican immigrants, a labor and community organizer, a proud member of AFSCME, the youngest person ever elected to Austin City Council. And he's also the national co-chair of Local Progress. He'll help Beto O'Rourke in taking, the governor's seats, and that buildup will benefit everybody. There are a lot of other folks running. Like I said, I'm not going to get into every single one, but I strongly encourage you to look at Charles Booker, who's running for US Senate in Kentucky, Maxwell Frost, who's running for Congress in Florida's 10, and Cori Bush, who's running for Congress in Missouri's 1st. Chris, you want to take the next one?
Next slide. And now probably one of my personal favorite initiatives, our Established Justice initiative that really focuses on our criminal justice work. One of the things that we know is that our criminal justice system needs to be completely reimagined. We need a complete overhaul. But when you look at who is leading the charge of doing a lot of making a lot of these changes, they're progressive candidates. There are people like Larry Krasner in Philadelphia as district attorney. There are people like Kim Foxx in Cook County, which is the Chicago area, as district attorney. So we have some phenomenal candidates this year for attorney general. And when we talk about some of these bans that we're facing right now, how those bans get enforced, a lot of that comes up to our attorney generals and what they decide to stand on. Already we saw Michigan try to push a ban on reproductive rights, and Dana Nessel said, I will not enforce any law of such. And so they really have a key position in not just the criminal justice system, but so many of the other fights that we're having right now. I want to quickly point out why we have our races to watch right here. We scored a huge win last year when we first created our Established Justice initiative, where we elected a candidate to Superior Court in Pennsylvania. And here's how we got all of our different theories of change to work on this race. We ended up winning, Lori Dumas ended up winning that race by just a little bit over 22,000 votes. Of the 78,000 people that DFA contacted, 25,000 of them went to vote. And these weren't regular voters. These were low propensity or low engaged voters, as I like to say, because it's not that they don't have the propensity to vote, it's that we don't engage them early enough or at all sometimes. And so to pick up that key win where she is the second only African-American woman to ever sit on that court in the history of Pennsylvania was a huge win for us. So when we look at our Established Justice initiative, we're looking at those statewide judicial seats, Court of Appeals, Superior Court, Supreme Court. We're looking at the attorney generals and really focusing on state and district attorneys, where we feel like we can be most effective of making a lot of changes early on. So as you can see, we have Keith Ellison, Letitia James, Dana Nessel, Aramis Ayala, and that's actually a little bit more of a sneak because we haven't officially rolled out our endorsement of her for Attorney General, but we were supporting her when she was running for Congress, and we will be supporting her in her switch for Attorney General. And then last to round out the list, Banta in California. So that's a look at some of our candidates, but again, Established Justice is huge for us going forward. And with that, I will cue up the next slide and we will turn it over to Christine.
Thank you. So I can go there. We have 39 or 37 congressional candidates that we're endorsing. Expect that AOC, Ilhan Omar, Ilhan Presley, they're all going to have that dark money that Chris talked about earlier poured into their campaigns. Unfortunately, we lost a race in North Carolina, Nita Lum's campaign. They poured in $3.5 million into her campaign against her. And so she lost the primary. We have to be prepared for that and know that what defeats dark money is being in the field, knocking on doors, and ensuring that these candidates have a strong ground game. I'll talk a little bit about a couple of candidates, but strongly endorse. I strongly, you all should take a look at these candidates for yourself and do your own research. I'm just picking a few. There's no particular order to these, so don't read anything into that. Donna Edwards is running here in the DMV area in Washington, D.C. She's running in Maryland's 4th district, which is right outside the border of D.C. She's among other progressive issues, Edwards fighting to pass Medicaid for all, protect reproductive rights, and shore up some of our public health and health infrastructure, particularly after seeing so many of the disparities that COVID exposed. In 2008, Edwards won her first congressional seat, becoming the first Black woman to be elected to represent Maryland in Congress. As a member of Congress, Edwards passed the bipartisan bill to provide over 1,000 jobs to NASA here in Greenbelt, right outside Washington, D.C., and expand STEM education. She helped pass historic investments in HBCUs and improve veterans hospitals. And she also secured some funding for Maryland's after-school program. Beyond that, she spearheaded the bipartisan effort to pass the Violence Against Women Act. Edwards was diagnosed with MS in 2008 on the same day that she was protesting, where they were sitting on the House floor with John Lewis to protest the lack of action on gun control. There's also another great candidate in New York, Brittany Ramos de Barros. Anyone who's running in New York at this point is probably really confused right now. They've been changing all their redistricting maps, the times when their primaries are going to be held, those kinds of things. But now that the redistricting maps have been finalized, now that the election dates of the primaries are semi-confirmed, we're getting a bit more clarity in New York. Brittany Ramos she's an anti-war commissioned Army officer. She's an Afro-Latina and an organizer. And she thought for a long time that her pathway to victory was going to include a big chunk of her hometown, which was Staten Island. But because of the maps and the redistricting, she saw a lot of her home district cut out of her new district. She's not letting that stop her. So her Democratic opponent has been seen with Trump on several occasions, but de Barros believes that if she can get enough name recognition, she can win. She's focused on her strong ground game. She's an organizer. She knows the importance of that. And so she's welcoming this challenge of engaging voters in this not so progressive district that she's finding herself in. But she believes that, good ideas and knocking on doors, that's what wins campaigns. We all at DFA agree with that. And then the last candidate that I'll point out for today is Angela Rogenseus. She's running for Michigan's 10th. This could be one of the biggest, most contested congressional races in the United States come the general. If she loses, she'll be running against, if she wins the primary, she'll be running against a very strong Trump lover, and this will be a very important race. Angela sits on the Warren City Council currently. She's a big friend of labor. She was the co-chair for the Michigan AFL-CIO. So she's got a tough race ahead of her if she goes past the primary. And this will be a really important race to get involved with and to know about. All of that being said, like I said, you can look into every single one of these congressional candidates. They all have amazing stories. And I hope you'll take some time to pick a few and check them out.
I did want to just quickly say, so that you know, this is not an exhaustive list of candidates. There are so many more amazing candidates we're supporting. So make sure you stay kind of connected to our website, where as we make new endorsements, you'll see those and you can get all the information you need about our candidates. You can go on and volunteer with them there, and you can also donate directly to the candidates there too.
Christine, back to you.
Oh, that I was finished with mine. You can go on to the Save the Senate.
So looking at Save the Senate, which is probably our #1 priority, at least when we were heading into this year, we feel like we have some extremely strong races and probably one of the best crop of candidates that we've had running for the Senate in a long time. As you heard Christine mention earlier, we have Charles Booker in Kentucky that took a lot of people by storm, even though he came up short in 2020. Sherry Beasley, which might be the most accomplished person on the Democratic side to run for US Senate in a long time and challenge a Republican. And then we have Mandela Barnes, Lieutenant Governor over in Wisconsin. And so when you just look at the pedigree of who's running, but the type of campaign that they're running to be inclusive of everybody, to go into the areas where folks, particularly Democrats, often don't engage, or they engage too late. So we're talking about not just focusing on the urban centers, but they're looking at already going into the rural parts of their states, taking the time to talk to those voters out there, finding a county where maybe a Democrat, if they lose 65-35 instead of losing 72-28, that makes the difference in these type of elections. And then obviously, we want to protect Georgia, and we want to protect our incumbents overall. But the three challengers, Charles Booker, Sherry Beasley, and Mandela Barnes, we feel like give us the strongest chance that are unapologetically progressive at flipping and expanding, well, not flipping, but expanding our majority in the Senate, where we can actually get some real progress done. Next slide. And so overall, one of the problems that I think we generally have as Democrats, but not as our progressive thoughts, is that we play defense too much. And this is not a cycle where we are going to be successful if we're just playing defense. It's almost always a losing strategy. That is why we're aggressively going after the Senate seats that we're going after. That is why we are, even though we're protecting our incumbents in the House, we are actually picking up open seat opportunities. So when we talk about Greg Cassar, that is one of those new districts in Texas that was an open opportunity. So we get a 2-for-1. We get to add another progressive to Congress, but we get to add another Democrat to our majority in Congress. When we're looking at Illinois coming up, you have Delia Ramirez, another open opportunity where we're getting a chance to put a progressive in, but we're also going to pick up another seat. So this year for us, we didn't see it as the time to narrow our focus, but we thought we needed to be more aggressive, because that's what our opponent is always going to do. And that is how they are always thinking. They don't take the foot off the gas, so we can't take our foot off the gas. A lot of times we lose these elections because we don't pour in the resources that we need to put into. I think you have probably heard us say it time and time again. You might become sick of it, but it is the winning recipe for progressive. We have to overinvest in field. That is always going to be a winning strategy. We are never going to be the ones that oftentimes outraise our opponent. So we have to outwork our opponent, and that takes resources, investing in organizers, investing into those staff members on the ground, but then also investing in these communities that we know we need to turn out. That means pouring in resources to make sure that we're protecting women, immigrants, trans kids, Black and Brown people across this country and across the planet. And so the great thing for us, we have, as you heard, over 78 candidates already this year. Our goal is over 125 for this cycle. And we feel like we have one of the strongest group of candidates when it comes down to their background, but when it also comes down to them just being unapologetically progressive and ready to take on the fight that we have this year. Next slide. And so with that, I will turn it back over to our leader, Yvette, to close us out and then take us into the question and answer portion.
All right, y'all, we covered a lot today. We do have time for question and answers. So if you have those, if you've already recorded questions, we'll try to get to those. In the beginning, we do the overview so you understand big picture how we do work. Know that our initiatives as part of our 50-state strategy are overlapping. So all this work happens together, but it also allows us to focus on what we think in this season is the most important ways for us to focus. So the 50-state strategy has been since our founding, started by Howard Dean. Our purple to blue strategy, we started that in 2013, and we've added additional initiatives so that we can make sure we're meeting the need of the day. So there are a lot of, we're doing a lot of work. We're feeling really, really proud of that work. This is one of the most important years that I've seen in a long, long time. And to Chris's point, our work is not just about building progressive power. It's about increasing the power of Democrats in this cycle so we don't lose the House, so we expand our majority in the Senate, and progressives are contributing significantly to that. And we're focused on making sure that we're looking at candidates who can add to the majority through these new districts. So I'll turn it over. I think we've got Molly fielding our questions, and then we will take those as we come. We thank you all for your patience. We know that was a lot to go through. We want to make sure you all know what we're doing and how we're doing that. We want to be as clear as possible. So thank you for your patience on that. Molly, who's our first question?
Yeah, before we get into questions, of course, as the money person, I have to ask you all if you could consider donating to us to fund this very important work. We had someone ask the other day, should I donate to you guys or directly to candidates? And I may be biased, but I think directly to us is the best investment. We're able to stretch your dollars so much further and support as so many more candidates with it. So on the screen, there's QR codes you can scan with your phone, or you can go to the link. The best way to support us also is joining our DFA Defenders. That's our monthly supporters. That allows us to respond quickly when we need to. So I'll ask again later. I'll send the link in the chat. And everyone that donates today will get this awesome Elections Matter sticker. So a little plus. So yeah, let's go into questions. Pat asked a great question about redistricting. He wants to know, how has redistricting impacted elections this year?
So I'll start and then I'll kick it over to Yvette and Christine. Redistricting had just so many effects this cycle. One, it slowed down our process of even being able to engage in state legislative races because there were so many lines that just weren't defined, as we have seen New York, they have one in June and now they have another one in August. Ohio, same thing, had election in May, you're gonna have another election in August. So one of the first hindrance was just how we were able to invest in some of these races early on. I'll specifically go a little bit more into detail in New York, because when you look at Illinois and you look at New York, Illinois is one of those cases where I think Democrats, it worked out perfectly and we didn't see an overreach. And so we're probably going to pick up 2 or 3 seats in the House. But New York was one of those situations where, because of how Democrats approach redistricting and tried to be aggressive in a lot of ways that we see Republicans, it actually ended up backfiring, where now we're going to have a much more competitive map than what we would have had before. And now you go from potentially picking up 5 seats to now you'd be lucky if you pick up 2 there. And so that was one of the other things that we saw mistaken. I would say, look at Michigan again, another issue where we saw Democrats pick to run against another Democrat instead of running in a slightly less Democratic seat, just because they would have had to campaign a little bit harder. So redistricting is one of those things where I think some states it played out well for us, and we had some really great candidates, again, Illinois, Texas, as well, where we got some good opportunities, even California, which I think a lot of times we take for granted. But Democrats, when we look at the past primary, and particularly for progressive, did really well in the primaries out there. But then we also have some states where we are going to have to do everything perfect to make sure we not only keep some of our progressive incumbents, but we're able to possibly hold serve in some of these key battleground states that we know Republicans are targeting, just because things didn't play out the way we wanted to. And then the last note I'll make on redistricting, and particularly for Ohio, what we are seeing is Republicans, even when you have a constitutional amendment to draw a fair map, they are looking for still the loophole to still try to gerrymander the map. And so I think that's one of those things that I think as the progressive movement, we did a good job for anticipating, but overall, there's still so much work to do when it comes to the redistricting conversation. In places like Ohio and Virginia, we're going to be having this fight about 2 or 3 years from now when they have to redraw the maps again, because it didn't get done right the first time this year.
Thank you, Chris. Next for Gilda's question, a really important one that I think everyone is interested in is, how do we get people motivated to vote this cycle? So I'd like to introduce Nelson, our grassroots power builder, to answer this question for Gilda and everyone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. As Molly said, my name is Nelson. I do our organizing work for DFA. This question that Gilda asked has been the heart of questions that campaigns and field directors and volunteer managers have been asking us. It's probably been the most asked question over the past several weeks. And so what we are doing is we are bringing back Dfa Night School. Night School is a way that we help to share the knowledge that we have gained through our years of expertise and our ability to see what's happening across the country, and to give that knowledge and those skills to campaigns, to people who are working on staffs, to future leaders, future campaign staffers. And so we are going to have 3 sessions of DFA Night School this summer, later on this summer, that are focusing on this very question of how do you engage volunteers and how do you contact voters, especially in this time when it is when people seem less motivated, when they're less likely to show up, when they seem less eager to vote. And so we are going to be digging in and helping campaign staff to be able to deal with that. You'll please pay attention to emails that will be coming out about DFA Night School shortly. We love for you, if this is of interest to you, to be there so that you can be a part of this great information.
Thank you so much, Nelson. And everyone, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Ethel submitted a question earlier when she signed up asking, when we have progressive candidates running on reproductive freedom and gun control, and prominent Democratic leadership support the Blue Dog Democrats, what are we to do? How do we build trust and traction in the face of such treachery within our own ranks?
I'll start with that one. One of the interesting parts of being a strong progressive organization, and one of the heartbreaks and challenges, is that we are a part of the Democratic Party, right? Strategically, it makes sense for us to be aligned. We have a lot of similar values, but we also are, we fight our own party. It is an interesting challenge. I like to think we help our party get closer to its soul. And that can't be more important than right now. We really are struggling, I think, within our party to remind, particularly with moneyed interest being such a significant thing, with a lot of compromise happening, this whole myth of the mythical middle, which I don't think exists. We know that people support progressive issues overwhelmingly. We know that people want a government that does something and does something real to help people. So one of the best parts, I think, of being an established organization in the progressive movement is that, one, we're well respected. We get the chance to make sure that we're partnering with other progressive organizations to build power. We also can resist and fight and push our own party. We have a lot of challenges right now with our party, and we will continue, I think, to hold the banner strong about what we know wins, what we know is important, and what we know people need to have in this moment. So we're in an interesting position because we work within the party and we also push against the party. It's actually one of my favorite jobs ever, is to speak truth to power and be a part of the resistance within our own party. We're also battling the Republicans constantly, a more disgusting, disgraceful Republican Party than we've seen in a long, long time. And so we're tired, y'all. We working hard because we've got a kind of a dual front fight, both with inside our party and, of course, resisting the GOP.
Thanks, Yvette. And then we are running low on time, but I did want to get this question that Dan submitted. Dan asked, what should we expect Republican attack lines to be in local contests like school board, district attorney, and county commissioner?
You want to start, Chris, on that one, or you want me to take it?
You could start.
The interesting thing about Republicans is that they're not that creative or innovative. So we know exactly what they're going to do because when they see something that they think wins, they do it over and over again. So we know that this myth about CRT is going to continue to be a big deal, right? The idea that we shouldn't be teaching kids the full history because it was going to traumatize kids if they know the very honest truth about our country and what we've done. So CRT will continue. You have to know that we also have partnerships with organizations like Generation Citizen that are out here defending teachers, defending superintendents who are being disciplined or otherwise impacted negatively by these laws that are on the books in Southern states. This is another reason why we have to do Flip the South work, because Southern states particularly are attacking teachers, superintendents, and other educators significantly. Of course, they're banning books as well. Don't Say Gay, we will continue to hear about that. We've seen that was in Florida, and now in my own state, we will see that happen even more. Of course, don't take our guns or arm teachers. We're going to see a lot of that show up in school board and local races. We know that mayors, sheriffs, they all have a lot of control, which is why we do a lot of our work around established justice so that we can at least have somebody that can help make sure that people are protected. This reproductive rights fight is going to be a really, really big fight. And it's going to get really ugly if once Dobbs is actually official, because states are going to have a significant amount of power to regulate women, particularly once they're pregnant. And so we're going to see that line, right? Like sheriffs having the ability to enforce this, local health officials having the ability to enforce this, mayors having the ability to enforce this. And so it's going to be really challenging. And these are the things that we expect Republicans to continue to talk about. This really is kind of a culture war, and Republicans are going to their base level supporter. And so expect a whole lot of that. What we expect our progressive members, candidates to push back with is just that regular, everyday, let's be equitable, let's be free, let's be better humans, let's not be racist, white supremacist, haters. And we're going to continue to not only do that, but have our candidates are going to talk about those everyday issues that people care about. So that is what we expect this year. Chris, I don't know if you have any more. I kind of went.
No, I think that the last thing I would just mention is the DA races. And I got to bring up San Francisco, where we just had the recall election for Chesa. And I think what we are now seeing is where we know both Republicans know that they generally can't win outright election, that this recall is one of the new formulas that they are going to try to pick off progressive incumbents. So I think that's the next line of defense. And again, it goes back to the dark money. I think you're going to start seeing a lot more dark money poured into these races. It kind of started in 2020, but I think it kind of flew under the radar. But we've just seen more and more of that pick up, where folks are trying to influence these district attorney races, but especially Republicans, by pouring in dark money into these races where they can't outright successful with their own candidate.
Thank you, Yvette and Chris and Christine, for a great presentation on our strategy, and all DFA staff that's here, and all of you for joining us. Just want to highlight, we are a member-driven organization as part of what makes us different than everyone else. So if you have any questions, anyone that works at DFA is available to talk to you at any time. Yvette is happy to call you. Christine, Chris, they can give you a call. So just feel free to email us. You can email info@democracyforamerica.com if you want to schedule a call, or if you have any questions. We would love to talk with you. And please donate. So you can scan the code on the screen or go to the Act Blue link in the chat and support this work. It will go really far. We can't wait till August to start hitting the ground. We have to, keep hitting it now. And you'll get an awesome sticker if you do. So any final words, Yvette, Chris, or Christine, or anyone else at DFA?
No, I wanted to, so go ahead, Chris. I'll close out.
I was just going to make one more appeal for the donation, as you're extremely huge for the work that we're able to get done and how we're able to support these candidates. So I'm actually going to issue a challenge. If you have the ability to, I challenge everybody on this call to sign up to give a reoccurring donation of at least $5 through the election day, to make sure that we have the ability to invest in these campaigns the way that we need to, and we can't do that without your support. So that is my one challenge to everybody.
That was beautiful, Chris. And it lends into my my appeal, which is also volunteer with us. You move this movement. We are proud to be a part of a strong grassroots people-powered organization that does this work the way that we should do it, which is one voter at a time, one amazing candidate at a time. We're building power across the country from the ground up. That's the way we believe it should be, not from the top down. But we can't do it without you. So we need you to reach out to as many people as you know, have them join us here at DFA, to be volunteers, to give whatever they can. And know that we will win. we believe that if you fight everywhere, you can win anywhere. And that is a part of our motto. That has been true for us. As Chris said, we have helped elect over 1,100 candidates. I think we're probably closer to 1,200 or more at this point. I got to recheck the numbers because we win races all the time. But we can't do it without your support. This might be the most significant moment. Our democracy is at stake. Republicans are not letting up. They are doubling down. So it is very, very important for us as progressives who care about our country and care about our neighbors to invest in this time. Give like it hurts. Trump is gone, but he is not gone. So, this is not the time for us to get complacent. It's the time for us to make sure that we're digging in. And your dollar to DFA is stretched further because we do a layer cake strategy. So every dollar we spend supports multiple candidates and not just one. Because when we talk to voters, we talk to them about multiple people that they can vote for on their ballot who happen to be progressives. And it also allows us to build this strong data-driven infrastructure that is really powerful and allows us to go back to voters again and again and again who aren't traditionally engaged. So the voters that we talked to in Pennsylvania for Lori Dumas's race will be the voters that we will engage in the Senate race in Pennsylvania this fall. So it all works together. But we are asking you to please give, and we appreciate you all taking your time this evening to be with us. Thank you.
And Hillary just donated $100. Thank you so much, Hillary. And she is challenging 10 people to do $10 to match. So I'm going to drop the link again. And thank you all. We will also send you an email. We will. We love to send you emails with this link, so you'll have it in your email as well. And again, please reach out. You can always reply to those emails and we will get right back to you. So thanks, everyone.
Carol would like the address for a check, so we should probably put that in the chat as well. Yes.
I'll put that in the chat right now, Carol.
We are still in Burlington, Vermont, where it all started. So yes, we are happy to give you that address, Carol. We can either email that to her or we can drop it in the chat for anybody who wants to mail a check. There it is. Good job, our accountant V, real quick with that. Appreciate that. Thanks, Thank you guys so much for being with us today.
Thanks, everybody.